Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 364, featuring the return of our very good friend Zap Andersson, the random render guy over at Autodesk. It was fun seeing Zap again, wasn't it, Kristen?
Yes, we get kind of like a good update from him on his life and new work ventures, which he discusses among OSL, Material X, which is a standard to transferring materials between renderers, and USD shading. And his goal is to combine them all into one to make it easier. Hasn't been done yet, but that's what he's trying to do. You guys also discuss a little bit about Metalness, which came in the previous episode of the CG Garage he was on. And you get to see his fabulous background, which he says some people screenshot and use as their own Zoom backgrounds because it's awesome.
It is very funny, very funny. Yes, Zap does. We do get into Material X quite a bit, which was great because that's the kind of person that we need to tell us a little bit about his thoughts on that. So it was really cool that he was able to do that. And yes, he does have some fabulous backgrounds as well. But let's get into some events. What's going on? We've got an event happening on March 4th. What's happening?
Yes. So it will be a masterclass on V-Ray 5 for SketchUp in Spanish. So if you'd like to sign up for that, go to chaos.com/events. And March 4th is when that's happening.
Great. We don't have any other big news on terms of Chaos itself. Obviously, as you guys know, with the merger happening, there's a lot of stuff happening that go behind the scenes. So I'm sure you'll get updates on that as we go. But if people want to know more about the podcast, where can they go, Kristen?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you would like to watch us on YouTube, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have any comments or suggestions on the podcast, of course, you can always email us, labs@chaosgroup.com. It's welcome. Now, before we go into our normal show, I want to let you know that Zap loves to redo the intro song himself of the CG Garage. And as such, he actually has his own Twitch stream where he just plays random music and does a bunch of memes and does a huge production with lasers and everything. So he decided he was going to do that exact thing for our intro. So we're replacing this intro that we normally do of the song with his intro instead. And I really, really, really recommend that you guys see it on YouTube because it's even funnier. So definitely watch it on YouTube. So remember, our YouTube is youtube.com/Chaos Group TV, youtube.com/Chaos Group TV, and you will see the full song, a gift from our good friend Zap. So with that, take it away, Zap.
Welcome to the CG Garage, where Master Zap speaks. A dumb blonde Swedish guy and synthesizers beats. This is what we're doing tonight. This is gonna be horrible, and you will cry. CG Garage, it's with Zap and Chris. With synthesizers, leaps and loops, and you won't miss all the dumb blonde Swedishness I'm giving to you, because I know how to count to 2. Welcome to the CG Garage with Zap and Chris, and the chitty theme tune you will never miss. Dumb blonde Swedish guy tweaking the notes. It's gonna be worse than you ever know. Welcome to the CG Garage as Master Zap speaks about things and stuff and computer graphics. That's the thing you wanna hear. If you listen and you really care. Welcome to the CG Garage with Master Zap. talking crazy and saying crap. Dumb, blonde Swedish guy, that is me. Now I'm gonna play the music, you see.
All right, just
Technology.
so people know, just before we start recording, Zap and I were exchanging pictures of our different Klein bottle apparatus. So we have the same one, yeah,
Yes, and
was
the different ones.
and different one. That's a traditional looking one as well.
Yes.
He makes Klein bottle scarves, I hear.
Yes, and knitted. You can get the pattern if you want to knit your own Klein bottle hat and all sorts of things. All the things.
I love Klein bottles.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of them.
I was thinking I should sample them, make some kind of Eine Kleinbottle Nachtmusik kind of thing, but that's for later.
Yeah. The first thing I started visualizing was I wanted to see a Klein bottle in four dimensions.
Right.
So
which should be non-intersection in 4D, right? The thing
Exactly.
this is a flaw. It says in the manual that unfortunately, since we're shipping it to a three-dimensional universe, we have to make it self-intersection. But if you're in a 4D or above universe, you'll get the pristine Klein bottle.
The pristine Klein bottle. And so what I did is I created in Mathematica a 4D perspective system, which creates a 3D shadow of a 4D world, basically.
Yeah.
And so I tried to move around, kind of like when you do with hypercubes or whatever.
Yep,
and then I try to see what would a Klein bottle look like if you moved around it and stuff. It was kind of interesting. How you been, man?
How I've been? Well,
You got the COVIDs.
I got the COVID. Although it wasn't that bad, but it was for me. I'm a guy. I don't normally get sick. I barely remember when I was sick. Seriously, and of course, when you work from home like I do, if you have a mild sniffles or something, I mean, it doesn't change anything. You work anyway, all right? But this literally knocked me out with a fever for like 2 days and like phlegmy cough, and then it was 2 days in front of Netflix under a blanket shivering with phlegmy cough, and then I was kind of okay, and the fever moved away after a few days, and I had the phlegmy cough for a while, and I think it's kind of gone now. If we have to make a phlegmy cough break, I'll let you know, or I will mute myself for that, but hopefully not. I should tell the viewers we had to push this a few times due to the phlegmy cough, but I hope the ASMR gods will be on our side now.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
And you, by the way, you are not the only podcast that had to be delayed due to COVID.
Yeah.
To literally the guest having COVID. So I have.
Yeah, and I mean, I did, to put it this way also, I mean, I wasn't super sick in the being something serious wrong with me, but I did test positive for COVID with the normal, the home testing kit kind of thingy. So I haven't had one of those more advanced. Maybe it was something slightly different or a cousin or what. I mean, technically, whatever we're getting these days is like the cousin. I guess it's this Omicron or whatever, which is mild-ish, and but yeah. Still alive.
Yeah.
Still alive.
I mean, I don't want to get into too much analysis of it and try to pretend to be a doctor when I'm not.
No.
Too many people are doing that right now. but anyway. So
did you manage to miss the whole nonsense, or have you been hit by the COVID
so
too?
Far, I feel like I don't know if you play dodgeball in Sweden, but I feel like I'm the kid all the way in the back, and everyone else is getting hit slowly, and I'm still just kind of hiding. And at some point,
that's a smart strategy. Yeah.
At some point, someone's gonna clear the way, and I'm gonna get it smack in the face.
It's actually kind of weird that I was the person in my family who got it, because I'm the one that is working from home and basically I'm home all the time. The rest are going to various jobs, and why I was the one that got it is a bit of a mystery, but oh well.
Well, it's been a while since we've.
It's been a serious while. Yeah, it has to be SIGGRAPH. What year?
Well, let's see. SIGGRAPH, it was in LA. So you were in SIGGRAPH LA, and then you stopped by here in Culver City, and we hung out there. So that, I don't know, that's got to be 4 years ago. 4 or 5
Yeah.
years ago. And then we did it in Vancouver.
We did
ages
in
and ages ago.
Vancouver. We were sitting in that corridor. I recall
Yeah.
that. It was way too
I-
long ago. Then again, nobody's
figured it
seen
was-
nobody for 2 years anyway now. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I figured it was high time to have you back, so it was good.
Thank you.
So,
That was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's going on with you?
What's going on? Well, computers and graphics and stuff like that. It's the same old stuff. Actually, I learned once, didn't you, back in the day, work on a little movie called iRobot?
I did.
You did. Did you work on the Sony thing with the glossy shell of the robot kind of thing? Then we have a little connection really way back in time, because one of the first thing I did when I started working at Mental Images back in the day, everybody was like, we need that glossy shader because it was in this movie. So I had to write like the Mental Ray glossy refraction shader. It's all your fault.
Well,
So-
that we didn't even use refraction to make.
No,
it
I
happen.
know. That was the thing. That was the thing. And then shortly after, or actually technically not even after, it was before, I wrote the Mental Ray subsurface scattering shader, which was a complete cheat. The glossy one was trying to do it for real. And back in those days, actually ray tracing that many rays, your computer caught fire and you have to wait overnight. Now you can do it on your watch, but it was a different amount of CPU cycles back then. So the subsurface scattering thing was a whole complete like 2.5D sheet, was kind of inspired on the work they did on the Matrix movies. So that was one of the first like 3D computer graphics things I did while working for real professional with computer graphics. Now I had a past before where I did it for fun as a hobby, while in reality I was working in mechanical design software. So I wrote my first renderer back in 1989, but I'm sure I told you this before, so let's skip that part. But I don't think I told you about our little link via the iRobot movie, so I thought that was funny. Yeah.
Just to let people know how we did it in iRobot back at a time. Like you said, we could definitely not afford ray tracing at the time. So we created an AOV that was that would calculate. It was like a Z depth, but depth from the shell to the back.
Yeah.
And then we would just make it somewhat translucent. So, but it was clear. You didn't blur it. And then we blurred it based on distance.
Yeah.
In Nuke.
In Nuke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
And it was,
surprisingly similar to how my actual subsurface scattering shader back then kind of sort of worked.
Sure.
So
sure.
that was.
We called it MakeBot, the script.
Yeah.
And then on Stealth, we had we did something similar to do all the Nuke stuff in Stealth, and we called it Pimp My Jet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the thing. Yeah. Okay. So in Stealth, you guys did for scratches on the canopy. You were doing some stuff which was aligning pre-made scratch texture perpendicular to the sun angle. Guess who wrote one of those shaders too? So that's also your fault.
Yeah. Well, now it's actually they've done a really nice one in V-Ray actually.
Yeah.
To do that, but yeah, those were. I thought we used to call those sun dogs. I don't
Sun
know if
dogs,
that's
yeah.
I don't know if
that's
the name
technically correct, because sun dogs is normally the reflections you see in the sky, which is ice crystal thingamajigs to the left and right of the sun at whatever is it, 22 degrees or don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
I'm not an optician. Well, I am technically, but by the way, speaking on aerial phenomena, I was just outdoors just before this podcast, and there's actually a pretty strong aurora going on right this moment.
Really? Lucky
So
you.
I took a few pictures. There was a way stronger one, like in January 14th, I think it was. It was one of the strongest we had in like a decade. So the whole sky was sparkling. Now it was nowhere near that, but everybody is jittery and want to see a repeat of what happened back in January. So I'm a bit of a nerd, and I have all the alerts and an app on my phone that's telling me the geomagnetic storm values and stuff like that.
That's nice.
Why not?
I've never seen them, and you see them all the time, I'm sure.
Well, not all. I live too far south to see them all the time. I do see them. Often they're pretty weak. So it's like, yeah, there's like a gray blob, but you take your phone with like a long shutter and you get something that suddenly now looks all green and way fancier than it looks to your eye. But the stuff that actually was back in January, even though it was a full moon, you saw it quite clearly with your eyes, which normally, like if the moon is up, it just drowns it out. So it had to have been really spectacular if the moon hadn't been up then. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius right now in LA.
Ooh, yeah, I don't have that.
It's a little warm for February.
No, that's not what we're doing here. Although it's above freezing and we haven't seen snow in a while. Although in the last few days, it's been this treacherous, like 1 millimeter of completely invisible ice on top of everything. So if you go outdoors, you just tip over immediately, even though it looks completely fine. So it's been treacherous. But yeah, no 90 degrees temperature here. That's not what we do over here in Sweden. So you put all the global warming at your house, or what's that? That's what's happening.
I don't know what's going on.
What's going on?
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's just a strange thing. So what's happening with you and what's going on at Autodesk and anything new you can tell us?
Yeah, there's lots of new. The more interesting question is what I can tell you, which is not as easy. To be honest, I'm working on a lot of interesting things. I have to weigh my words on a scale carefully, not to say the wrong thing. But something I am working a lot with these days is in relation to materials and shading standardization, so to speak. We're looking at stuff like, as you know, I'm very deeply involved with OSL since we added the full OSL stuff to 3D Studio Max. But I'm also involved with Material X and ideally, I want those two things actually not to be two things. I want them to sort of be one thing, because like the reference implementation of the standard library in Material X is an OSL implementation. So what if Material X and OSL wasn't actually two different things, but actually sort of one thing? Would be fancy. And then we have USD, of course, and USD has its own representation of shading called USD Shade, which is a fairly simple way of just wrapping some shade tree information, not as deep and complicated as Material X. But I'm also like, wouldn't it be fine if that and Material X was also one and the same thing? So I have my own little personal dream project where I can convince my friends with USD, my friends with Material X, and my friends with OSL that we're actually going to make it one big, juicy, fantastic thing that solves all the problem. Am I successful today with this dream? Not quite yet, but I'm working on it. I'm on the various technical steering committees for Material X and OSL. Well, I should be technically accurate. I'm not. Autodesk is on the technical steering committee. I'm actually not the person who is officially from Autodesk. That's a different guy. But I'm in all the meetings, and I don't think anybody technically, because it only matters if we get to a vote, and we haven't literally in any of these projects. There's been no voting involved.
There's
it's
no voting.
People talking, and we say things, and we make intelligent decisions. So I've been involved with a lot of that. But that is, of course, extremely like high level and lots of discussions and meetings, and doesn't like generate that much overnight cool features that becomes a cool demo that I could show you or something. So there's a lot of talking these days, to be honest. The last time I wrote the shader, I don't remember when it was. Well, actually, I do, but yeah, that was. We did a really sexy wood shader, actually. But,
I am curious about Material X. Like, so tell me what you can tell me about Material X, and or tell our audience about Material X, and where you think it's going to be. How is it different than OSL? Why
Well, that's the thing. It's all these three things, like I mentioned, USD, Material X, and OSL, are three different aspects that are sort of intersecting. For instance, USD is a scene description, universal scene description. It defines geometry and stuff. It has some stuff for shading, but it's a thing called USD shade. But it's not really very strongly defined what goes in there. It's kind of like a container that can contain shade trees, and then we kind of hand wave the rest away, and we're going to put something in there. And what's been done to this day in USD shade is effectively that whatever renderer you're using, whatever nodes it's using in its shade tree, you put this into the USD shade container format and say, here you go. And if the same render on the other end, it will just work. So that's all fine. What Material X is, it's a project trying to make a standard to transferring materials between renderers. And it's actually also has like several components to it. One is just a file format. It's like an XML-like file format, which likes define how you transport the data. That part of Material X is very similar to the USD shade I was just mentioning a minute ago. The next part of Material X is that there's also like a standard library. There's a set of like standard nodes. So if you have these nodes and you use these, there's like an add, there's a multiply, there's these kind of things, right? If you use these nodes, you know that a Material X compliant receiver on the other end, it doesn't have to be the same renderer anymore, right? Because as long as you use this standard set of nodes, the other side could then understand this standard set of nodes. So that's like part 2 of Material X, this standard set of nodes. But you're not forced to use this standard set. It's really just kind of a very gentle this suggestion, like these are the ones we suggest. But you don't have to. You can define your own nodes, and you can define your own nodes either in terms of other nodes, like a node graph, and say this is my complicated blah blah node, which is defined as this subtree of the standard nodes. You can also define your completely own nodes, but then you must also supply some form of implementation. And like I said in the beginning, that the reference implementation for Material X is a set of OSL shaders. But it's not only an OSL, so it comes with various other languages. And there's actually a third component to Material X, which is actually stuff that we from Autodesk provided, which is called Shader X. At least that's what we call it internally. It's basically a shader generator, which takes a Material X graph of Material X nodes and its implementation snippets, which is in a particular kind of database, and basically assembles it into an actual runnable shader in some shading language. So if you have this Shader X component, you can use it to turn your Material X graph into something like a GLSL shader that would run in Viewport 2 in Maya, for example. Right. So, or you can turn it into one single OSL shader, or you can turn it into a set of individual OSL shaders connected together. You can do either in this case. And then if your renderer does OSL, then you just render that. So that's my simple explanation of what Material X even is. It's an attempt to standardize a way to transfer shading graphs between systems. It also gives this set of standardized nodes to simplify this. Again, you could use your own nodes and stuff, but if your life is easier if you stick to the standard nodes, because then your probability of success is higher. The node will still like show up on the other side even if you don't have it, but like how would you know how to render it? There's also a whole level of stuff where you can do replacement and say, I don't have the node, Bob's Magical Mystery Tour node, but I have this fake shade tree of my own shaders that is sort of kind of like it. So can you please use this one to render it, for instance, and this kind of stuff. Now, and then of course we have OSL as like the third leg of this wobbly tripod I'm imagining here, which is a shading language. And OSL is a shading language. Well, it's a programming language that you use to write shaders. And the interesting part with OSL is that it also has, similar to Material X, there's like this standard library of functions in the language. Basically everything works according to the standard library of functions, except in one area. And that's the thing which deals with materials, or what's it called inside of OSL is called closures. Now, the technical definition of a closure is really a function plus its parameters. But if you ignore that, you can think of the closures in OSL as basically your BRDF. There's a diffuse closure, there's a glossy closures, and these kind of things, right? And the problem in the past with OSL was that everything was very well defined except the closures. The closures are like, then we're going to have some closures, kind of, and here's a phone how it could look or something like this, right? There was no usable standard set of closures that was kind of dictated by OSL. So that means if you had a renderer which run OSL, yes, you could write the texture shader very easily because that never touches the closures, and they were all compatible everywhere, and everybody, and the sun was shining and everybody's happy. If I wanted to write the material shader and say I want these many % diffuse plus these many % glossy and the Fresnel here and whatever, because everything has Fresnel, then you couldn't really do that because Arnold was using one set of closures, V-Ray was using a different set, RenderMan was using a third set, etc., etc. So one of the things I was involved in was actually very recently was proposing a standard set of closures for OSL. And of course, since we have this fairly close collaboration between the Material X people and the OSL people, I say, why not just pick the set of basically BRDFs that are in Material X and make them the standard closures in OSL? And to my insane surprise, everybody said, that's a great idea, let's do that. And then we did that.
All right.
And I was very surprised because I had set up this whole Slack channel to make a long discussion and try to convince everybody of this. I had this whole people with inviting people to our Autodesk Slack channel to discuss this because I think this is going to be long, hard to convince everybody. And it turns out it took 10 minutes and everybody agrees. And now it's actually in the OSL spec that basically there's this set of closures that your renderer kind of should support. You can have your own too if you want, but this set should kind of come in there, and that will makes it also a lot easier to pass like material level OSL stuff between renderers. But the way we implemented OSL in Max, we do not support closures actually in Max for the old reason that there was no standard in them. We did shading differently by inventing like a standard surface, as you probably heard, the Autodesk standard surface, which is like an Uber shader, and basically say that everything goes into this Uber shader, and then whatever goes into it, yes, that can be all programmable. It can be done in OSL, or it could be bitmap textures or whatever you want. But we keep the shading in this like standardized form because I'm kind of a strong believer that Mother Nature isn't actually very, very, inventive when it comes to shading. There's some diffuse and there's some glossy. There's a couple of interesting effects like thin film and stuff like that with iridescence and all this stuff. But otherwise, it's kind of run of the mill, and every material is kind of the same-ish. But texturing, when it comes to actually texturing these materials, Mother Nature is extremely inventive and can come up with the most wiggly, curly, interesting little, stuff. And I recently made a very cool procedural wood shade. Now, I shouldn't take full credit for this. Honestly, I shouldn't take any credit because the shader is based on was a SIGGRAPH paper by Merschner et al., which is the root base of this shader, and it was implemented by some other people inside of Autodesk. So if you use the wood in Fusion 360, it's actually this wood shader. And what I did, I basically translated it into OSL because it never actually existed as OSL. So I recently, like 6 months ago or something, basically made the OSL version of this shader, and it looks really nice. It comes with a set of really cool presets, and the feature when you run it in Max also, since we have we transcode OSL in the viewport to HLSL to run it in real time in the viewport, and this shader is also fully supported. So you get this really nice wood, really nice real time in the viewport. You can do all sorts of stuff by randomizing, like doing per object randomizations. So the wood grains are slightly different in each object. You can have, you can do fake. You can make knots with a little bit of a trick, because when you have a knot in wood, what that looks like, is like most wood shaders are like a bunch of cylinders. Like, imagine a bunch of cylinders, which is the rings, right? Mm-hmm. And then you take these cylinders and you kind of wiggle them a little so they're not completely cylindric, and you wiggle them in various dimensions, and then you make this like a 3D texture, and when you cut through this, it looks like wood, right? And the more you wiggle and the more little details you can add to it, the more cool stuff you have. But if you think what happens with a knot in wood, it's a new branch that is starting to grow. So it's like a new center. So it's like a new set of cylinders that starts happening in the bigger cylinder. But I noticed you can cheat this really nastily by instead, if you think of the coordinate system of these cylinders, and then you do something like a Voronoi noise or something, where you basically compute a random point somewhere in this 3D space of the wood, and then you check if I'm getting close to this 3D point, I'm actually kind of warping the wood so as if we're going towards the center, even though we're not going towards the center, which means what visually happens is that you get this new set of rings that are locally around a certain area. They all flow very nicely into each other. And it's this super ugly trick, but it actually looks surprisingly much like a knot in wood. If you combine this with a little darkening in the same area, it looks bloody awesome, actually. So this such a shader shipped with the recent release of Max. But since it's an OSL shader, and since we make all our OSL shaders as the Apache 2.0 free to use, I've seen people using them in all sorts of places other than just Max. So that's cool. Fun stuff.
That's cool. Yeah. All right. So what is the promise of these things?
I won't
you're all going to be able to exchange?
I mean, the dream promise is that you should be able to exchange things between renderers more easily, or like between DCCs even. So you should be like, I have this scene in Maya, I save it out, the geometry as USD and the shading part as Material X. You should be able to load that up in some other application, Max, Houdini, wherever you want, right? And basically see the same result. Even if it might involve somewhere some translations where, like, say, we package this, we have these two textures that are multiplied together. So I have an image node, an image node, and a multiply node, and that becomes an image node and an image node and then multiply in Material X. But when you load it up in the Max, well, that's actually a bitmap and a bitmap and an RGB multiply node or something like that. It might be slightly different, but the main intent like can come over to something else. And the more people stick to this standard set, the better. But it doesn't preclude you from not doing that. I mean, like we already have for like one mode where we store an Arnold shading graph in the Material X document. So it's just basically the Arnold shaders, but stored in the Material X format. And if you're receiving something that does Arnold, it already today, basically with some stuff we have, can be unfolded. But that is a more, this is a bit of an early days trickery thing.
USD is more than just translating data between apps. I mean, USD actually has layers that it can use.
Yes.
And all. Yeah.
I know way too little about USD, unfortunately. For especially the non-shading part of USD, I've sort of ignored because I'm the shading guy. So it can do all sorts of magical things of which I know nothing. So don't ask me those questions because I don't know.
Well, I'm just curious because there's a lot of ways that I'm wondering in the Material X. I mean, obviously, well, here's the thing. Like, Material X makes sense. A lot of renderers are very similar in terms of what they do today than compared to, let's say, like 20 years ago, right?
Exactly, yes.
RenderMan 20 years ago was not like,
Yep.
Arnold today. It's like completely different idea of what a rendering does, right? And there's no way you could you had shader writers for like that would write shaders for everything, everything.
Yep.
And now it's more like, well, this is how physics works, so that's how the shader will work. So there a lot of the shaders are based on physics, right?
Yep.
So Material X seems like it should be like A, B. It should be the same. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, we're not in detail there, but just as you're saying, we're way closer to be there than we've ever been before in this industry, because we'll all sort of align to maybe we should do these physics things. It might actually work. And we figure out that many of the things that used to be done with tricks in shading, maybe it's not the place for it. Like, because we matured a lot more when it comes to like the whole color pipeline and how to deal with, tone mapping and looks and LUTs and all this kind of stuff, which is the correct place of doing many appearances that you like 20 years ago you had some shader which screened on your specular highlights because it looks nicer, because you were rendering with no gamma correction and you were doing additive and no tone mapping and anything. So there was a lot of wrong things going on back in the days, and now when we basically learned a lot more, we're rendering in bigger color spaces and all these kind of things. It just looks more realistic, and we understand that the stuff that should be tweaked like in post, we tweak that in post. And even that is different these days because people used to render out everything in layers and just comp it together, and now it's more like that's physics. We just have the beauty pass and maybe we do a tiny tweak on top of that, but do we render everything to 1,000 layers routinely in these days? Not really. It depends on facilities, but in many cases not. You just maybe render out a few light passes like the environment light and the sun or whatever separately, and so you can balance these in comp and these kind of things. So like light mixy stuff. But do you sit there and have the diffuse and the indirect diffuse and the primary and secondary, glossy and specular separately because somebody thinks specular and glossy is different things, but they're not. And then you have a Fresnel layer because everything has Fresnel, and you do that in comp, right? And it's just a complete disaster, and nothing looks correctly because you tried to do stuff in the wrong place. I remember back in the day, so many people tried to render everything with no shadows, and then with the shadow pass on top, just to be able to tweak stuff in comp. And it's like, you can't do that if you have more than one light. You can render individual lights, that's completely fine, and those additively add together. But the soon you have more than one light, you can't actually do like a shadow pass because it just doesn't work. The math doesn't compute the same number. Basically, you can't postpone to comp anything that is a multiplication. So you can't to get the correct results. If you were to emit your flat diffuse and then you, which is basically just the textures but flat, and then you also emitted your diffuse shading without textures, and then you emitted your shadows, then it could sort of work if you had only one light in this situation, but even then at certain anti-aliased pixels, which were 50-50 of something, was still wrong. It just doesn't work. And these days we're smarter than that, and we output stuff that you mix additively together, which is fine. You can, color grade your skylight versus your sunlight to your heart's content, and everything is still completely physically accurate. So we've grown up, I think, as an industry, to be honest.
Well, it's also was, the comp always felt like if you don't give me everything, I won't be able to do what I need to do. But it depends. I mean, it depends on who's. I've seen it. If there's a show that's run primarily by a 3D person, you get less layers coming out. If it's run by a comp person, then you get a lot of layers coming out. So DD was very comp heavy, so they love to have a lot of control over things in that sense. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious about all this, about the workflows and standards and stuff. I mean, I'm thinking it's very interesting. We've been talking about this since the very first podcast. In fact, I was just thinking about the fact that our first one, we were having a big debate about metalness.
Yes.
And the term
Famous.
metalness. And
Famous, yes.
that actual episode is still very much referenced a lot, because if you search the word metalness, that comes up quite a bit, because we debate about it quite a bit, which was good. I think, honestly, I just, my argument for those who didn't know is like, if you go to a physics book, there's no such term as metalness when it comes to describing materiality of things.
Well, there is. It's called being dielectric or being a conductor, and it's 1 or 0. It's either or. But is there a slider? No. No, there's not.
No. Yeah. It's whether it's metal or not metal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an education thing. You need to educate. You shouldn't set this at 30%. It should be basically on or off. But I think people are used now with all the. I mean, PBR workflows is like a standard thing these days, and they're all based on the same kind of paradigm. And all the tools amidst this, you have Substance Painter and all these kind of things, So it's become way more mainstream and pretty common now.
What do you think about all that? About, like a lot of people using Substance and things of that nature. Like, what do you think of this? Like in terms of the workflow and how it's going with shader looks and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I think I actually enjoy this stuff and Substance. I haven't used Substance much myself, but I've seen it used, and I mean it has lots of cool tools to basically. I mean, what it does, it's like procedural shading, but specifically for this object, right? So you can have a procedural set of shaders that does say edge wear, and you don't even have to paint the edge wear. You just say, I want this much edge wear, and it just magically figures it out. And then you can go in and paint for yourself. Like, actually, I want more edge wear in the corner. And if we're on top of this sort of standardized shading model that we kind of are these days, I mean, you're emitting 4 or 5 maps, and you just apply them to something like standard surface, and you're done. That's all you need. So. And of course, this front loads the whole proceduralness to sort of the asset creation texturing stage, whereas something like OSL does the proceduralism more on the back end, on the render side. And I think there's room for both, and one doesn't preclude the other in a sense. I mean, you could always bake your OSL if you want to do that, which is something that also happens.
Slow. It can be very slow if you.
It can be slow, and then you can bake it, of course. But in some cases, like I mentioned, the wood shader. One of the cool parts with it, it's effectively an infinite resolution, or well, not infinite, but it's. I mean, you can fly into an ant on your piece of wood, and it looks good all the way down to ant and back up to a whole wall made of planks, and none two planks are the same. You can't really do that up front without like giant. How big a textures do you want? And you want one per plank on this entire city made of wood. Procedurally, you can do that. But
you have to have a ray that goes out there, and it's got to figure out what that color is. When it's a texture, it's like that's the color done.
Yeah.
No, it's like okay, hold on, let me figure out what the color is.
Yeah. No. It's more cycles to figure out the color. But if the choice is between running 50 cycles of math to figure out the color, or alternatively have 1 terabyte of textures. And having to swap that in and out to find that color, it might actually be faster to do 50 cycles of math, because it might be more cache coherent maybe than finding that texture. So it depends. Of course, the world is changing here too, with like the amount of memory we have in our machines these days compared to 20 years ago is ridiculous. So maybe it's just make everything texture, but. You want to zoom into that 1 millimeter with the fly, though. Those textures have to have some serious resolution.
Yeah. I did one of those once. It was crazy. One of my first sort of jobs out of grad school was doing visualization for the Rice nanotechnology lab, and I had to show people like what making a cable out of nanotubes would look like. And so I zoomed into the nanotubes until they got down to like, a nanotube. And it was like, oh, this is really hard. Because, by the way, there's precision problems once you start going down. That's
I actually ran into that. The very first thing I did in 3D Studio Max many decades ago was like a space animation with the spaceship flying away. And when it got further away from Earth, I ran into these precision problems. Everything started vibrating because I was basically so far away from the origin that, the bit resolution of the floats wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So, that can happen.
There was a problem with that actually with V-Ray a long time ago, which Lotto promptly fixed. But it was when we were doing the light jet sequence on Tron, and these jets were going at like Mach 2 or whatever crazy speed, and then they would be just knocked on right next to the ship. But they wanted to actually travel at those ridiculous speeds in 3D for some reason, and the whole ship started. Just
that is exactly. Even wait, I'm following it with the camera. What's wrong with it? But the problem is you have to add this number, which has more,
more precision
this
than
big,
it has.
and then you only have this many digits of precision. And you can, with luck, if you reorder the operations, you maybe can actually get around that, but not necessarily. That
you
depends.
just take everything back to zero.
Of course. That's the way you can do it.
Yeah. So everything goes back to zero, except that's invisible to what you're actually seeing. So in the rendering, it just goes back to zero. Well, that's interesting. What else you been up to? You're still doing your music Twitch stream?
Yes, that's actually, I guess that's technically new since we talked last, even though it was 2 years ago since I started. So as those poor slobs who heard me on this podcast before, I tend to do my own version of the intro song because I'm a music nerd. And then, of course, this COVID nonsense and lockdown started, and we were all supposed to stay at home and basically don't hang out with people. And I was like, okay, what's I going to do then? And then my son's girlfriend's sister had a bass that she was like, I'm going to sell this bass. Do you want it? And I was like, I never played bass in my life, but okay, I'll buy your bass, be friendly. So gave her some money. I took her bass. Okay, now I had a bass. And I'm like, dang, okay, that's a C, I think. And then I was just sitting one night, and I got in this interface so I could plug it into my computer, and I had a little super simple keyboard, MIDI keyboard, and was running Ableton on my laptop, and I made some stupid stuff, and I'm like, there's this software called OBS where I can stream this. I just, for the hell of it, like this one-time thing, just for fun, going to stream this online. And I was like, that was kind of fun. So I'm going to do that again. And I did that again. And then I was like, I have this extra space now because I have, for various reasons, I've inherited my parents' house. So I have extra space. So that's where I was doing all this stuff. And I also had all the equipment I used to use for music when I like 20 years ago was very heavily into music as well. But it was all standing here in my office, kind of turned off. It hasn't been on since 2008 or something like that. But I was like, I should bring up some of my old synthesizers. So I brought them over to the other location. I'm like, oh, they still work, and this is kind of cool. And I started plugging in stuff that hadn't been on for 15 years or something like that, and it worked. And I was like, okay, this was fun. So let's get one extra camera, and then let's get one more extra camera. And now I need all the Twitch streamers have lots of blinking lights, so I get some RGB lights here and maybe one more. And if you've seen it recently, there's smoke, there's lasers, there's projectors, there's multi-camera switching and complete and utter nonsense. And what I do is that I just improvise stupid songs on the fly. And that is actually the main thing for me, because the thing that happens when you do music and you try to be serious about it, and especially these days when you can do everything in the computer. And I think people in 3D have the same problem. But like this is like when you have this whole world that you can make, but at any time save, and I'm going to go back to this later, that means you never finish. Now, back in the late 80s, 90s, when I was making music, you were doing it with hardware and synthesizer hooked up to a sequencer and stuff, to a real mixer. So it's like I had to finish this song and record it somewhere, because when I unplug everything is gone. There's no way to return to this point in time other than taking a photo of all the knobs, and you still can never come back. So that forced you to finish things. But these days, you load something into Ableton and you have some, I mean, the classic case is you make a 2-bar loop and you think it's really cool, but it doesn't go anywhere, and then you save it, and then you start anew and you make a new 2-bar loop or 4-bar loop or something. You have lots of unfinished things, and that is this creative weight hanging off you. As like, I never finish anything. I can't start a new thing because I have 200 unfinished things. And then I saw one of these YouTube musicians, Andrew Wong, who was playing around with this little OP1, a little synth, which I also got one recently. I bought that, so I should have it on my long flights and all my hotel. I bought it just before there was never any long flights in any hotels. But anyway, it's a little music workstation, tiny, battery powered, very cool. And he made this video where he was just jamming on this and just going through this delay or this looper pedal, so you can make, even though you can do loops on it, was doing it through this looper pedal. He was just jamming shit, and I was like, okay, that was fine. Delete that and do the next thing. And I just looked at it and I went, wait, you just delete it and just forget about it? And that was like my huge epiphany. Yes, that's the absolutely best thing. Just delete the damn thing. Then you don't have this pressure of this unfinished piece. So what I do, I sit down, I start a rhythm, I jam some shitty chords, I put some bass and some stuff, and I can punch some channels in and out live. I start doing god-awful rapping, or even worse, sometimes I sing. I probably make people cry. Some completely random invented lyrics, and I have a couple of different things I can switch between. I make this whole thing, I can punch channels in and out, so that make this whole build-up and breakdown and stuff. And then in the end, I go ta-da, or I say boom, song over. I do select all, I hit delete, and we'll never hear that freaking thing ever again. And it's such a wonderful feeling, and it's been this glorious mental health thing for me in this, weird world we're in now. It's been so liberating, and it just feels so good to not have these 200 unfinished things. And I mean, they're not completely deleted, because I stream them to YouTube, and you can go there, or then Twitch and YouTube, and you can go there and listen to them later, so they're not really deleted. But it just takes this whole endless tweaking, because death by tweaking, every 3D artist know the death by tweaking thing. Like, I can change this and I can change that. When you can't change stuff, and what you did, that's what you did, it's so liberating. It's just, I recommend anyone into any form of art, try it. Force yourself to like make a painting in 3 minutes, then rip it to shreds when you're done, or something like that. So you never get this urge to over-tinker, over-tweak, get lost in meaningless little details, which is like the death. It takes away all the joy of being creative. You just do the joyful part, and then you just throw it away, and it's awesome.
You want all the icing and none of the cake.
Exactly.
Okay, hold on. What is the name of your Twitch stream so people can follow you there?
Yeah, so I run into this problem. So on Twitch, I'm Zap Andersson with 2 S's, because that's how you spell Anderson. Although on YouTube, I'm Zaptronic, Zaptronic, Zaptronic. You can also go to zaptronic.com, which just redirects to the YouTube thingy. And actually, on the YouTube version is the one that stores everything, because Twitch only stores for like a couple of weeks or something, and then unless you make what they call a highlight of it, it's just gone. So the longest. Like the longest archive is on YouTube, but I stream it. I technically stream it on Twitch. I stream it on.
Do you have a regular
Twitter.
schedule?
Not really. It's when I feel like it. I had a schedule. I sort of said like Sundays and Wednesdays. Which I missed every Sunday and Wednesday for the longest time now. So I probably should take that down, because especially now, since basically I was sick with the COVID thing, I haven't been, because I do it normally in the evening, like before going to bed, and now it's been, so it's like at 10 p.m. Swedish time I start, because that's at least somewhere in the afternoon in the rest of the world.
Right.
But basically by 10 p.m. in the last few weeks, I've been like, I probably should go to bed instead, and actually go to bed instead. So no, there's not really a schedule, but I will probably try to be better with that. But if you, there is on Twitch, there is like a schedule page you can go to where I do have my thing with this Sunday and Wednesday times. It's in there, but I've actually missed all those times for the last 6 weeks.
I know that you did do it on Saturdays too, because we do my Martini Giant one is we Twitch on Saturday, and someone said, "Oh, I just left Zap's Twitch and now I'm going on to yours Twitch." So it's funny.
Yeah. Saturdays, sometimes this happens too. It's really when I like, okay, it's getting late, but I'm not let I have to go to bed. Let's just sit there and jam some crap. So it's very unplanned and very, very loosely based. I will make you a theme song for this episode.
Well, soon. You better hurry, because the times is getting short between when I record them and when I do.
Okay.
So get cracking on it.
Yeah, I will do it right away then. I will just do something simple. But because no editing, remember? I just sit down, play something, and I send you that file, and we're all done. Very, very, very liberating. Yeah. No, I will. Worst case, you will just use the standard one. Never mind. We'll see. To the listeners, whatever you heard in the beginning, it was either me or it wasn't, but we'll notice that. I will notice that when I listen to this. You already know. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Wait, that's very meta. Anyway.
That's right. We're in the past, but they're already in the future.
Exactly. How does that even work? That's completely backwards. It's like we tried this on my first, when I clearly told you that what you did hear in the background, and then you forgot to put it in, so that was extra weird. Right. So now let's not bother. Maybe there was music. Who knows?
No, we should put music in. I think.
Yeah,
I think that's a good thing. All right.
Yeah, and I actually planned. I was vacillating between being here, which is my office, or being in with the smoke and the lasers. But I went for being in the office, because you can see my Klein bottles and my bubbly tubes and all the other neon unicorns and other stuff we have, because unicorn is our team mascot, and also the technology is way more complicated, because there's a DAW involved and a camera switcher, and I'm like, that'd probably break this whole thing streaming. So I took the easy way. You get some eye candy anyway. Actually, when someone in Autodesk, because this is where I'm in all my meetings. I have so many meetings. I live on Zoom these days. But there's a lot of people like, oh my God, Zap has like the coolest meeting room. And there's been a trend lately where people have taken snapshots of my background when I'm not there. And then they use the feature in Zoom where you can put in like a fake background, and they use that, so they used my office, so I can end up in a meeting and there's like 5 people that are sitting in my office besides me. It's like, okay, well, because I have my Nixie tube. You can't see my Nixie tube.
I can't see your Nixie tube.
You can see. Okay, well, we can edit it.
2251 it says right now.
It is. It's 2251. That's actually true. Well, I don't see that you see my Nixie tubes then, but then that's fine.
But yeah.
I guess you can edit this. You can reframe this later or something. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't know how we'll see how it all fits together.
Excellent. Yes. Excellent. So there's my Nixie tubes.
Yeah.
Good.
And is that a little who's the character in front of him or behind it, right behind it?
This is a C3PO.
It's hard to see it with this resolution.
Yeah, it's a kind of low res. Yeah.
And you have a Kung Fury poster.
I have a Kung Fury and Iron Sky posters that are both signed by the directors, because I was backing both of those projects back in the day. So that was some of the Kickstarter stuff.
We did an Iron Sky watch party for Martini Giant.
Nice.
That's a crazy ass movie.
It's a crazy movie. And there's this talk about the Kung Fury sequel. It keeps bubbling and I don't know what's going on with that. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger was posting a photo with Daniel, the Kung Fury guy. So I think maybe we'll pop up a sequel which is actually a Schwarzenegger in it. But I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I'm not really involved beyond the Kickstarter thing. so yeah.
Are you going to start traveling again soon?
Good question. I actually just got an email earlier today from my manager wondering which conferences I would be interested in going this year, if any, virtual or not. So I will probably try to sign up for SIGGRAPH, some Total Chaos, or some stuff. You see if any of those will actually materialize in reality. But yeah, I might slowly start actually traveling again.
Okay.
Remember traveling? This all feels very surreal.
I don't even go to the office. It's like I don't even get the.
I never went to the office.
I know. Yeah.
That's the funny. For me, it was never really much change because it's like I've been working from home since 1989, so now I need to work from home. What a difference!
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I do. I don't know if I miss it or not.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff that was going on, going to the airport and doing that whole hassle was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And I'm weird around people now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to have its mark on humanity for sure somehow.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the next time I'm going to see you in person. I think it's probably going to be at the SIGGRAPH. I don't know if SIGGRAPH is happening in person.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think we know if there's going to be a physical SIGGRAPH yet. I don't think that's decided. So, and, if there's budget to drag Gudumblon Swedish person there, meaning me, we'll see.
It's going to be interesting. It's interesting. We got a lot of stuff that's going on at Chaos. Got to figure out everything with this merger happening and all that stuff.
That stuff.
So I'm not sure we have everything figured out just yet. But anyway, it's all very exciting.
It's getting excited. And then we'll see what happens, if we get like a roaring 20s like they did back in the day, where everybody's wild and partying is kind of a reaction to we beat the sick thing. Now we're all gonna, I don't know, sex and drugs and rock and roll or what. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
It's called Web3, buddy.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Decentralized everything. Yeah, it's going to be that. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah, and set fire to the planet while doing it. That's really clever.
Well, depends. Depends how you look at how you're actually doing it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Well, listen, buddy, it's been great seeing you. I would love to see you in person sometime soon.
Likewise.
So likewise. We can do that, SIGGRAPH or otherwise. But it's good talking, man. Thank you for giving us the lowdown on your take on Material X and where it's going to go, because I think that's very interesting, and you are definitely the person to help us figure that out.
Yeah, I'm trying to be a little bit of spider in the web between all these open source projects. And now all these projects are now under ASWF. The
Academy
Software Foundation. Yeah, ASWF. I keep mixing those letters. Yes. So which helps. OSL is there, USD is there, and Material X is there. And of course, OpenImageIO, OpenColorIO, and all these things kind of go together like a big, glorious piece of big, glorious thing. So
a big piece of glorious thing. Yeah.
Yes. So great. I'm very, very hopeful we can win. I think I never felt this much synergy in like I said before, when I sort of proposed for the OSL guys, let's just use those over there. And it was like, yeah, let's do that. And I was like, well, okay, that was too easy. But I think everybody's tired of everything being like proprietary and special, and like you can't use, like someone like Weta can't use an asset that ILM made because everything is just so different. Everyone's kind of tired of those kind of things.
No more walled gardens.
Yeah. Open standards and working in open source projects. It's great for everybody. And
But people do what they want to do and not have to force them into some ecosystem that
Yeah.
traps their creativity. And then what they do after they've done it, they just delete the file.
Exactly. Exactly. Just delete it. Just make the coolest freaking material ever and just delete it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. It's true. You know what? It's like when I catch a fish, I look at him,
Yeah.
take it out, and I throw him back in the water.
Exactly.
And I never take a picture. And no one else
I've
is
seen you
around.
take a picture. I've seen you. That
I've
has
done,
happened.
sometimes
That's happened.
I do take pictures. I don't take a picture of every fish I catch.
And sometimes I
I've got to-
edit your pictures and make them even funnier.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. Well, it's great talking to you, man. And we'll do it
Likewise.
again soon. And I can't wait to see you in person.
I agree.